Good morning and welcome to the Business Lens of Rapid Television, Abuja. It is great to have you with us on this edition where we look at how all the numbers and figures directly affect you and your businesses. So let's begin with the key business trends that matter right now, starting from the headlines. Nigeria's foreign currency denominated tax receipts jumped to 6.33 trillion naira in 2025, which is up 27.3% from 4.97 trillion naira in 2024, as multinational companies, export-driven businesses, and exchange rate movements boosted collections, while total VAT and company income tax receipts climbed to 17.83 trillion naira. Now, away from that story, we move to the World Bank that has committed $8.2 billion to expand electricity access across sub-Saharan Africa under the Mission 300 initiative, which is a joint plan with the African Development Bank to connect 300 million people by 2030, as nearly 600 million people in the region still live without power. And the next says President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has removed Saidu Mohammed as Chief Executive of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority and nominated Rabiu Abdullahi Umar as his replacement, subject to Senate confirmation in a fresh leadership shake-up within Nigeria's petroleum regulatory sector. And to the next, where we have 4 months after the expiration of Nigeria's National Broadband Plan from 2020 to 2025. Telecom operators are calling for a new policy framework as the country falls short of its 70% broadband penetration target, with current data from the NCC showing penetration at 51.97%, which leaves nearly half of internet users without access to high-speed internet. And away from that one, we move to the global stage where the global oil prices have surged sharply, with Brent crude climbing above $126 per barrel and WTI rising to 110.48 cents as reports say U.S. President Donald Trump is also considering renewed military action against Iran, raising fresh fears and concerns of supply disruptions in the global energy markets. Now let's turn to East Africa, who has attracted $4.1 billion in investments between 2021 and 2025, with experts crediting capital market reforms, improved governance, and foreign exchange liberalization in countries like Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda for boosting investor confidence and easier market access. And to the next, where we have Namibia's central bank that has kept its benchmark repo rate unchanged at 6.50% for a third straight meeting, as policymakers balance easing inflation, now at 2.1% in March 2026, the lowest since 2020, against rising risks from global oil prices and geopolitical tensions. I am Divine Alex. We'll look at the stories and more after the break. Stay with us. You are welcome back. This is still the Business Lens of Abuja. My name is Divine Alex. When we look at all the headlines, it takes us across a mix of fiscal strength, infrastructure gaps, energy shocks, and shifting global capital flows, from Nigeria's rising FX-linked tax base and broadband shortfalls to major global developments in oil prices. Now we have power financing and interest rate decisions that are shaping investor sentiment across Africa and beyond. Joining me on today's conversation is economist Abiola Adekunle from Key to Market. Now, also I have with me on the call Daniel Efa, who is also a global business analyst. Now, we talked about the fact that the foreign tax linked went up as high as 6.33%. Now, what do you think is the reason behind this Nigeria's FX-linked tax surge, and how sustainable do you think it is going to be beyond the exchange rate effects?
The first thing is, we mentioned on some earlier episodes that this particular administration had made it easier, albeit more expensive, but easier for foreign companies and companies that do businesses in foreign currencies to be able to repatriate their funds, their profit and all that in USD or in foreign currencies. This has also helped us to harmonize and to give us, a sort of unified exchange rate, even though the exchange rate is now higher than what we experienced about 3 years ago.
Okay.
Now, because of this, a lot of people now have this level of confidence in actually leaving their businesses in foreign currencies and also using those foreign currencies to transact. Now, because of this, the government is experiencing a spike in taxing this particular foreign domiciled businesses. When I talk about foreign domiciled, I mean the currency, because most of them are still operating here in Nigeria. So if, speaking in layman terms, let's assume about 4 years ago, I used to do my business in Naira. Then whenever I want to buy anything, I would convert it to USD, buy, bring it in, convert it to Naira and all that. Now, people are much more comfortable just leaving their old funds, in USD. And this is increasing one way or the other, the amount of tax they have to pay in that currency. The whole idea is if they continue, they'll still pay the tax irrespective. But before now, the taxes were being paid in the local currency. Now the taxes are being paid in the foreign currency, and we are seeing a spike in that. But for me, what I would say about taxes is this: it's not good enough to celebrate that we are earning a whole lot of things or a lot of money from tax. What we need to celebrate is the effect of these taxes. Now we are getting a whole lot that's increased by so many percentages, but what is the effect on the country?
I was coming to this effect because I wanted to ask you about the effect, and I wanted to ask if this growth is primarily real economic expansion or it is just Naira devaluation effects.
Yeah, it's majorly Naira devaluation effect, and also, like you mentioned earlier, it helps to stabilize the exchange rate, because the whole idea of the exchange rate being stabilized is that we have enough foreign exchange to be able to mitigate and also to come to the rescue of the Naira when we see that the Naira is losing value at certain times. This is part of the jobs the policies of the CBN. So practically, it's helping our foreign exchange reserves. It's helping us to, have a much more stable exchange rate. But when you look at the economic effect, you can hardly see it. But ease of doing business, ease of repatriating your funds, to a large extent, this is actually helping.
Okay, let me come to Daniel. Daniel, are you back with us? Now, how much of this 6.33 trillion naira do you think is actually driven by multinationals versus FX revaluation gains?
I think it is more about the multinationals. I think that what we have seen in the last couple of years, it has shown that we can basically expand our economy if we want to. The oil sector, for example, has been a major stay, and we've seen a lot of activities in that regard. We are now more like a net exporter of petroleum products, which is not what it was some years back. So that means that a lot of demand will come get towards our shores, and we'll definitely make a lot of money from it. Of course, liberalization also plays a role, because that has really pushed the liquidity in that particular space, right? So it's a combination of both. And the only thing that we clamor for is to maximally exploit any opportunities that comes our way, particularly when it comes to FX, to FDIs, to FPIs. So yeah, it's a mixture of both.
Of both. So now, do you think that with a stronger naira, that it is definitely going to significantly reduce future tax performance on paper?
We don't need a stronger naira, to be honest. We just need a stable naira, so that we can have this consistency for businesses being able to have a certain level of stable tax receipts, stable accounting conversations, because the volatility over the years has really cost. A lot of them are still in net losses. By the time you calculate how much they lost from COVID up until pre-2023 or post-2024, you realize that everyone are still in losses. But then the way it works is that they can basically, if there's a lot of stability now, which we've seen from almost like 24 months now, it can begin to help them recover as soon as possible. But that risk is still there, and we don't necessarily need a stronger naira. We just need a very very
Stable naira.
naira.
Okay, that's okay. Let me come back to Economist Abiola. Now, despite rising tax revenues, why is Nigeria still struggling to convert fiscal gains to visible infrastructure and service delivery?
To a very large extent, it's more of a political discussion than economics, because if I make, if I have an increase in my salary as an individual, let's say my salary goes from 1 million naira to 10 million naira per month, the onus rests on me to decide what to do with that extra 9 million naira. I can party with it, I can go clubbing, I could travel and enjoy myself, and I could go and take courses that will improve me. I could decide to build a house. So to a very large extent, the whole idea of making more money for the country somehow is being solved. We are getting more income. And the decision to now channel that particular income into infrastructure, into health, into education, where we see that we have a whole lot of non-implementation going on, it rests solely on the government. So at some point, the government are the ones that can actually come and answer and say, okay, we have made X amount of trillions, that we did not make 2 years ago, and this is the area we're putting them in. Also, we have a whole National Assembly that can also guide this whole process and be able to push it, to say, okay, where is this money being channeled? Why is it not being channeled in this position or in this particular way? But at the end of the day, this is what I would like to say.
Okay, go ahead.
If the country actually channels the proceeds or the increase in our income, towards what will give us more revenue, everybody makes more money at the end of the day. What I mean is this: if I make money from a business and I put 50% back into that business, definitely that business is going to expand more and give me more money. But if I continue eating all the money that comes from that business, then that business is going to remain stagnant.
It's going to be stagnant,
if the government of Nigeria wants to make much more money, then whatever we are making now should still continually be put into profitable and revenue generating infrastructures and areas, because that at the end of the day will guarantee us more money in the future.
Okay. Now, what do you think are the biggest leakages between the revenue collection and public spending outcomes?
Revenue collection, major leakages, if you take aviation, for example, is digitalization. Because the analog processes in Nigeria in every sector slows us down. When things are digitized, even if there's a fraud, it is easy to quickly audit and check. Everything can be seen, everything can be gone through. If I have 2,000 pieces of paper, A4 paper, and there's a fraud inside of it, I have to go through every piece of it and try to understand where the fraud took place. But if I have 2,000 pages of documentations or transactions, it's just a command, and I'll be able to fish out whatever is going on with it. So digitalization always is better at the end of the day than analog processes. The government has done a whole lot in making a lot of their processes digital, but we still have a long way to go. So to block leakages in terms of revenue generation, make it as digital as possible. Let it be as easy as possible. The easier people can do things, the more you can get. It is a basic business principle. If you make it easy for people to get into your business, it means that you have more sales. But if people find it extremely difficult to even register for your business, then it's a problem. You want to pick up tax, I don't have to go and queue for 5 hours because I want to pay my tax. I should be able to do everything online, and at the end of the day, you see that you have more revenue from that. So you can block leakage this way.
True it. Okay, thank you so much, Economist Abiola. Let me come back to Daniel. Now, Daniel, what reforms would ensure VAT and CIT growth translate into real economic impact?
Okay, I think that VAT and CIT VAT is majorly, I think it's mostly now shut down with the state government. CIT is still majorly the NRS's job, which comes to the federal government. I think that the issue with the fiscal conversation as a whole is usually tied to lack of direction. I think the only certainty in anything government has been doing so far the fact that they can pay salaries, right? But then any other thing comes from an angle of confusion. Why am I saying that? This current administration is probably the highest end or highest earning government so far, right?
Okay.
And with the kind of reforms that we've been hoping for over two decades, different reports from World Bank, the IMF coming up with different statements about different reforms that we should embark upon. And this current government has been able to at least do a chunk of these reforms, right? So what is the most, for a country with so much infrastructural gap, with so much, a lot of decayed infrastructure, what should be the first point of call? It should be looking at the existing infrastructure and looking at how can this infrastructure become alive as soon as possible. For example, the roads, right? I was expecting that earning so much in after subsidy removal would begin an operation save our Nigerian roads projects that would just trickle across all 36 states, all the major federal roads across from Lagos down to Maiduguri, right? Roads will be done, properly done. That can probably take a travel time from Lagos to Maiduguri that will take probably over 24 to 30 hours now to have about maybe 18 hours, right? That alone would have made whatever conversations around subsidy removal made sense, right? Because the people can see it. Right. The only thing, well, right now, what we are seeing is government embarking on very giant projects that will not be completed even in 5 years. Coastal Road, Sokoto to Badagry Road. Those funds earmarked for those two projects can solve our existing road structure, make it make sense because there were existing roads to Calabar before, right? From Lagos. So why not fix those roads, right? Fix it. If there's a need for tolls, I know the former Minister of Works, that's Mr. Fashola, talked about a PPP as a den, right? That companies can come up, take up part of the structures with the government and put a toll on the road, right? To get their monies back after 10, 15, 20 years. So at the end of the day, it is not necessarily a contract that would have been wasted. It would have still yielded back the investments to the people. So for me, if you keep saying fiscal, because it requires decision making, it is not like the only projects I can point to in Nigeria right now that is actively serving the people are Sukuk bond projects, right? If you check your major roads, you see
Sukuk bonds. Yes, the signage is there.
Yes, those ones are fixed for the purpose they were meant for. But anything that has to do with the fiscal authority deciding what to do, it's a big problem, and that is where it is hard, right? And that is where it is going to be very hard in the nearest future for another government to come in and say Nigerians will sacrifice and Nigerians will sacrifice. It will be very, very hard because we basically took up let's FS liberalization, subsidy removal. Let's go for it. Let's see what happens. And 3 years down the line, it is still a struggle, right, to still move from Lagos to Abuja by road. It is still a struggle.
It is still a struggle.
It's so that alone negates whatever conversations we're having. I don't understand, however, a fiscal policy maker will sit down with me and tell me, no, this is what we are doing right now that is benefiting the people that are taking almost 600, 700 increase in their cost of living because of those reforms that were made.
Okay, thank you so much, Daniel. Let me take a swipe to the telecom sector. Now, with the broadband penetration still at 51.97%, what do you think are the structural bottlenecks that are preventing Nigeria from reaching its 70% target, even after the policy cycles?
I think that that is still an infrastructural issue. Because if the way communication is so tied to financial inclusion is so much that if we solve broadband issues up to penetration up to 80 to 90%, we are likely going to get high level of financial inclusion.
Okay.
Right? Because of of how the fintechs in that space have been able to come up with solutions that can assist consumers, right? So I don't think it should be I don't think it should be an NCC project or a Ministry of Information project.
Okay.
It should be both a CBN conversation and also the Ministry of ICT, because we know that as soon as immediately we are able to get to a point whereby we have almost 80 to 85% or 90% broadband penetration, it signifies that we can now take a lot of our things digital, right? So that means I can be in my house and simply order for a new passport. Can be in my house and simply do transactions with anybody in Nigeria. I can be in my, so it's the ease becomes easier. It becomes more prominent, and it can move whatever we are trying to achieve in terms of policy making, because even part of our policies is tied to the fact that a lot of people are not digital enough, right? So the government comes up with a policy on housing fund, for example, that every Nigerian can access, right? You can't access because some of them are in the rural areas. For example, the so-called poverty register that we say we have, which is not verified, can be confirmed from people being, again, completely financially included. You can see from their statement, you can see that these people don't have this fund. So the drive towards cashless policy, financial inclusion, is really tied to whatever we are trying to do with broadband, and it has to come, just like every other infrastructure, it has to first come as an infrastructural concern first, before you now start looking at how do we start making money from it for the private sector.
So Daniel, is the issue of infrastructure rollouts, right of way charges, or is telecom investment constraints?
I think it's a function of both, right? So this is what I've noticed about us now, and I don't know why we did it with oil, but then we struggle to replicate the same thing with other sectors, right?
Okay.
You know your plan is to wire up, for example, the entire country, right? And you know that your foreign investors or foreign partners are coming with infrastructural technology and everything, would definitely they know that they have to get paid, right? So why not just sign a contract to pay them for setting up infrastructure, and you sit down with your own local businesses to say, okay, this is what we spent already on this project, right? This is what we plan to make. This is how we plan to recoup the money spent by the government, right? So businesses, if you are coming to take up this part of this project, this is this and this and this and this and what you're going to let go. Same we did with oil. We brought these companies to come and drill. You drill, give us a part of what you drill, of what you drill. You sell the rest, and everybody smiles them at the end of it. So those kind of JVs are what we need for almost virtually all sectors of the economy where we have infrastructural deficits. Nobody comes to do businesses for free, but at the same time, if it's an essential for your people, you have to also spend something. Then whatever your plan is to recoup whatever it is, sit down and have a plan on how to recoup, and that's basically how these things should be run.
Okay, sit down and have a plan. Let me come back to Economist Abiola. Now, how much is rural connectivity dragging down national averages, and what role should states and private sector partnerships play in closing this gap?
This is a very broad conversation.
Okay.
But I'm just going to say some parts of it, because if you look at Nigeria, more than 50% of Nigeria is still in the rural areas. Because if you do a quick search on Google and you tell it to list the top 20 cities in Nigeria, you will see that some of the so-called top cities are not really global cities in the sense of it, which leaves so much to be desired. Because if you understand the fact that we have 36 states and the FCT, 20 top cities in Nigeria means that we don't even have up to one in each city. In each state. What I'm trying to explain is that you can have capitals or states, okay, all over the country, but do we have all of them at the same level? No. Whilst a place like Lagos can be compared to a whole country, you can have other states, capitals that are not, that are far behind. So the rural setting is even going beyond the state capitals, meaning that we're even looking at a worst case scenario. So yes, the rural infrastructure and deficiencies and all that is really dragging down the averages by a whole lot. Because if we're looking at urbanization in Nigeria, off the top of my head, I would say that we are not even up to 40%, meaning that not up to 40% of the populated areas of Nigeria are urbanized. We still have a whole lot of places that there's no power, there's no good internet connection, and this drags us down. So when people look at Nigeria, I've sat down in some foreign meetings before, and they'll be looking at what is the disposable income of an average Nigerian. And by the time they bring it up, I will dispute it, to some extent. The reason why is because you might have a disposable income of $500 per month, for example, for an average Nigerian between so age range and so age range. But by the time you go into the data, you will see that it's so skewed. When I say skewed, it's so biased towards a very few number of people that have a whole lot of money. Then you now have a very large amount of people that don't really have money at all. So by the time you check the average looks very good. But by the time you understand the full picture, you see that there's still a whole lot of people, businesses in rural areas, and it's dragging down the averages and it's giving a wrong picture at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you so much for that one. And before you go, let's take a swipe to the African economies. Now, how exposed are African economies to external geopolitical shocks, like the Iran-related oil price surge that has gone above $126 per barrel?
We're exposed to an extent. What I mean by that is, if you look at the global space, look at China, look at India, look at the USA, these are countries that produce. These are countries that actually produce, and the major source of their production power is crude oil, one way or the other. So you now understand that if they have a shortage, or if there's an increase in the source, the power, what fuels their industries, then their products are going to be much more expensive. But when you look at the African continent as a whole, compared to the Western countries, compared to the Middle East, compared to Asia, you find out that our level of production is not that much. So even though, yes, we are being shocked by the increase in the price of petroleum, especially crude oil, the shock is not as crazy as the Western world, because Africa does not produce so much. Africa likely is an import-driven continent so far. Look at Nigeria as a case study. We are import driven. That is why we are always pushing for the naira to be, to be stronger and all that. If we are production oriented and we export a lot, we would be pushing, like China and Japan, for naira to actually be cheaper, so that we can be much more attractive to those that want to buy from us. So at the end of the day, in summary, the African states are being shocked by the global prices of crude oil, but not so much, because we really don't produce much.
Okay, let me come back to Daniel. Now, are African central banks equipped to respond to imported inflation shocks? And could sustained oil spikes trigger another inflation wave across import-dependent economies?
So let me have the second one.
Okay.
Price shocks will send waves to all countries globally. It's not just Africa.
Okay.
Because the world is not ready for another $120 per barrel, and I think crude might stay there for a while. We know what happened the last time we had that interest rates skyrocketed across board. The bigger countries were able to curb it, but the smaller countries, the emerging economies are still struggling, right? And that alone is a big problem. So now going back to African central banks, this is the problem. Monetary policy usually is properly transmitted in countries that are very formal. So for example, in the US economy, for example, if interest rate is increased today, you can almost see the effect in the market almost the next day, because it's a very formal economy. Everything runs through their banks. Coin circulation, you can easily track it. You get the numbers and money supply flow and everything. But for Africa, it's a big problem. There is a largely informal sector that overshadows the formal sector. So when you even transmit monetary policy tools, it only affects a very selected few, and even sometimes increases inflationary pressures, like we see with Nigeria. Some of those high interest rates even cost more harm than good, but because we can't even measure, we are so informal that we can't even measure properly how many people are getting affected by this on a daily basis. For example, if we have a data for unemployment claims, for example,
Okay.
you would see how many people have lost their jobs in the last 2, 3, 4 years, right? If you see, if you have data for household poverty on a steady basis, you will probably see how many households have dropped below the poverty line. Because we don't have this data, you don't necessarily tend to see the effect of all these monetary policy tools, and that's why for me I usually emphasize on the fact that if your focus is on your people, right, you would find a balance between, because if you have a largely informal sector, you find a balance between what will I transmit to the informal sector that would reduce the effect of inflation on them, while I also will transmit my monetary policy tools to the formal sector to also alleviate whatever is happening. But either way, we will all learn again with another inflationary pressure. Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much for that one. I wanted to ask you one more question. Which African country or countries, right, do you think benefits versus those most at risk when we have higher crude prices in African?
To be honest with you, as far as African countries are concerned, nobody benefits. I would have the oil producing are not getting it right also. We can talk about the Algeria, the Moroccos, but then because it is a two-way street, just like a double-edged sword, right? When your prices are so high, you sell, you make a lot of money, but to bring in inflation in other products also. Now this is the problem. Now we're having a two-phase inflationary pressure coming up right now. One is a supply-driven inflation, because there is actually no supply. Some certain supply of certain products has been cut out by the Strait of Hormuz being closed, right? And also the price of food. So we're having so many multifaceted supply issues, and this might be different from what we saw, and it's a very, very big risk even to the global economy as well. So African countries will always follow whatever is happening to others. Nobody is insulated like that. Everybody will get affected, and let's see how everybody navigates these trying times.
Okay, thank you so much, Daniel. Economist Abiola, now let me ask you one question as regards to the East Africa's $4.1 billion investment inflow. Now, does this signal structural confidence or short-term capital opportunism?
I think it's more of short-term capital opportunism, because over the years, we've seen the way investment flows into Africa. To be candid, we've seen that investment that comes more from Asia are more infrastructurally driven, and they are more long-term.
And thank you so much, Economist Abiola and Daniel, for being a part of the show today. And from that one, we move to the next important notice. Today is the last day of grace for filing tax, today being April 30th of 2026. You can check the website on the FCT IRS and generate your tax identification number, which is TIN. You can also use the same website to locate the nearest tax office around you and go file your tax. Filing your tax is not paying your tax immediately. You need to go to declare your assets. So in case you are not earning, this is your opportunity to state it. Secondly, we have the BVN thing, the changes from the BVN taking effect May 1st, 2026. It is starting tomorrow, which means that there are changes that you need to be updated about. The Central Bank of Nigeria introduced new rules that tighten how bank verification number, that's the BVN, the BVN works across the banking system. The key takeaway you need about this is that the BVN is becoming a stronger digital identity tool for banking security and fraud prevention, especially in Nigeria's fast-growing digital financial space. So customers are also going to face stricter rules around the BVN link details, which includes the limits on how often you can change certain personal information, like your phone numbers, especially the ones that are attached to your BVN, and also enhance verification processes when accessing accounts on new devices. I'm talking about when you want to switch your bank apps from one device to the new device. Now, this is all we have for you on today's Business Lens. Do follow us on all our social media platforms at Rapid TV. Thank you for watching. I am Divine Alex.